Everything on the risk radar stands where it was yesterday. Stocks green. See the bull down there looking pretty green. We got highs. We're up right now almost 80 bips. Gold gave back a little bit here today, but just marginal 80 bips after a huge rip. So gold still is green on the radar too. Watch for bonds and the dollar and coins for tomorrow because it looks like the coins are just heavy regardless. Another down day for BTC, but the dollar and bonds still don't have a clue. So yellow there, trying to figure out some range. Dollar creeping up again. Mr. Scott Bauer, CEO of Prosper Trading Academy, with us for some thoughts here on the closing bell. Pretty good session here, Scott.
Earlier this morning, it looked like things were turning south. We got back to pretty much even on the S&Ps, and then as the day progressed here, I'm not really sure what is the impetus behind this, because the data that came out this morning was pretty mixed. The jobs numbers weren't good either from ADP. The weekly jobless claims, those weren't good. We got manufacturing services data, which was kind of mixed. Import, export, trade data, which was way out of line.
Yeah.
And then here we are, though. And what we're seeing, Oliver, is the CME FedWatch tool is up to a 98% probability of a cut in September now.
Right. So no matter what happens tomorrow.
Exactly. So the market is almost prepping for a number that is in line. Maybe it's a tad strong, which is fine, but a number that really is not going to derail what the current path is for the Fed. But it's really interesting because I don't know what happened during the day today to see that shift. And when I take a deeper dive into option markets in SPY and the Qs, IWM, there is a pretty large skew to the downside. So if we look at, 3%, 5% out of the money options, the skew on the puts is way higher than it is on the calls. And
yet the calls are still cheap.
Yep. And yet here we are. Here we are, with pretty green on the screen heading into tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that's a good point and a good follow-up from yesterday, because it just looks like folks aren't ready to buy in for whatever reason, which is kind of strange when the market seems to be. I think NVIDIA maybe scared people a little bit because it came off post-earnings. I think maybe the crypto stuff that's been looking kind of weak maybe also, but all that stuff is kind of secondary.
Yeah, I think it is the crypto stuff, but you're right, it is secondary. But listen, there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money in the crypto space, and we're not just talking in actual crypto, but the funds that own them. So all of the ETFs, on the equity side of things, there's a lot of money. And then obviously, MSTR, which is, kind of used as a proxy for Bitcoin. I know you were talking about that a little earlier. To me, it's surprising that MSTR is not actually ticking up today, even with Bitcoin being a little bit weaker, because there's all this chatter that MSTR is going to be included in the rebalancing for the S&P.
Yeah.
We might find that out tomorrow. If that happens, I would expect MSTR to go higher. But you're right. Bitcoin, Ether can't hold a bid right now. And if you look at Bitcoin specifically, that 110 area, that's a pretty significant area. And we dipped down below there earlier this morning, just as for the bulls, it couldn't break out on the upside at 112.5, 113. 110 is a pretty significant line in the sand on the downside.
I'm looking at IBIT right now, down 2% on the day. Master found a little bit of life here. And by the way, stocks too, into the bell, finding more buyers. Just a nice rip there in the last 15 minutes. You mentioned
we saw that yesterday too.
Yeah, same story, right? Same time. By the way, IWM at 237 right now, up more than 1%. So the small caps are really waking up.
Yeah, which listen, that you look at the small caps as maybe a reflection of what the landscape is for interest rates, right? And so, maybe people are looking at tomorrow's number as being in line or maybe a bit weaker rather than on the bounce back side.
Yeah, the small cap potential for some leadership, some rotation. I think a lot of folks were looking for that, so that's there. Gold. GLD came off a little bit, but I don't think anything we talked about yesterday changes really. SLV, though, it just seems to always be the weaker version of the two, which is kind of frustrating.
It is really frustrating because just as for as a comparison to crypto, for the longest time we were looking for ETH to, catch up to Bitcoin a little bit, in that ratio. Same thing with the gold silver ratio. We've been, really waiting for that ratio to narrow down a little bit, for silver to maybe outperform a little bit, and really just hasn't happened.
Yeah. The master trade that I was in, I'm largely out of that, partly because I'm going to Vegas and, it doesn't hurt to have a little extra liquidity, but also because I feel it was just a pretty darn good trade, basically, from late June and July down. To your point about the cryptos having a bunch of assets behind it, the other way to look at that theme that your guy Charles Moon brought up to me was some of the miners that were pretty good, but I don't know, maybe those are starting to break down a little bit. It just, I don't know, the market for some reason, I guess, is just prioritizing the rotation into other stocks rather than crypto stuff right now to some extent.
Yeah, the trade could also be getting a little long in the tooth. It could be a little bit of a tired trade here.
Yeah.
And I think that, specifically with Bitcoin and Ether, not so much some of the other alts, but specifically with those two, you might see some, risk taking off ahead of tomorrow. So depending what that news is tomorrow, and depending on what the trajectory of other rate cuts are, not September, but beyond October, December, even going into, Q1 of 2026, we could see a little bit of a pop in the crypto space.
Talking bonds and tomorrow, TLT 70 bips up today, pretty decent rally. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here to give the year-long perspective, because I can't find much of a trend in bonds yet, but I wonder, Scott, if tomorrow locks in a cut, if maybe TLT does start to break out higher in price, lower in yield for bonds.
So it is set up for that. And here's why I say that, because recently we have seen, the short end of the curve really move a lot differently from the long end. The short end of the curve has been stable, maybe even coming down a little bit, while the long end has been going higher because of the risk that is associated with global bonds, global bond markets, central banks, just borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. So if we start to see that Fed funds rate in the future come down a little bit, then that could stabilize some of the longer end, which TLT is representative of the 20-year. So when you look at that, or the 30-year bond, we could see some stability there, see some bids come in and yields come down a bit.
All right, like that. Any trades that you like for tomorrow, whether macro or stocks, Scott? And we talked yesterday about the strangle spreads or swaps rather, that you were looking at for the kind of the broader market, but some particular names you mentioned as well.
Yeah, there were, and one of them actually has earnings out after the close tonight, Docusign, that I have that exact position on.
Yeah.
So that'll be for tomorrow. But, going into the rest of the day, unless there's a big outlier tomorrow, I think we're still going to have summer trade tomorrow, just like last Friday going into the long weekend. So I think we could see that tomorrow unless there's a big outlier number. So I know I'm really light on my positions, heading into a print like this. I don't need to pick a side. So unless there's something that I really have strong conviction behind, I'm on the sidelines, which is fine.
Yeah, fair enough. That's kind of my thought too. Part of the reason I took the master trade off.